discuss this situation further, let's bring in Joshua Landis. He's the director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma. Joshua, thank you for joining us. Of course, pleasure. Now that we see this report from Israel stating that they are talking about a full offensive, land, air and sea, where will this take the conflict? What point will it bring it to?
Well, the Netanyahu government has said that they want to crush Hamas and destroy it. And that means occupying Gaza Strip. And they're going to have to, they also want to search for the 150 hostages that have been taken. But that leaves them in control of Gaza. And how will they leave? What's their exit strategy has got to be one of the first questions. And there have been a number of proposals by policymakers, and one is to try to get the PLO to take over Gaza and replace Hamas as the leadership. That's going to be a very difficult thing to do. It's not clear that the PLO will want to come in on Israeli tanks. And so this is going to be a real challenge for Israel as it tries to figure out how to create a new Palestinian leadership in Gaza.
A lot of people are stating that this is just not just about Hamas, though, that civilian targets are very much real, and that, you know, people fleeing en masse will not have anywhere to go, let alone to be able to return to their own homes. So this is a much grander issue here, isn't it?
It is, and that's one of the reasons I think, as your earlier report, the Egyptians have been very loath to open Rafah crossing. Even to get out the Americans that are caught inside, because they're worried that if they open that gate, the Gazans could be driven into Egypt. There have been a number of Israeli officials who've proposed that the Gazans be allowed to move into big tent cities in the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. And so I think the Egyptians are worried that this could end up that they could end up hosting hundreds of thousands of Palestinians that might never return to Gaza. So people are looking at what happened with Syrians flooding into Turkey and Lebanon, and they're also, you know, so they're wondering, why don't the Israelis open up their borders into the Sinai, into the Negev desert, and set up tent cities there?
Iran has threatened to get involved in the conflict if Israel does not scale back. What happens if not only Hezbollah starts to get more deeply involved, but if bigger players like Iran becomes part of this conflict?
Well, that is a big question, and a number of think tanks in the United States have already said we've got to begin planning for this. I imagine that Iran is going to be more bark than it is going to be bite. It's hard to imagine Iran jumping into this, because it will take a big blow, and the United States would perhaps move against it. On the other hand, there is tremendous passion in the streets of the Middle East, and Iran is trying to exploit this and show that it's willing to do something, even if Saudi Arabia and other Arab countries are remaining quiet as Gazans are bombed by Israel.
Saudi Arabia obviously was close to normalizing ties with Israel before the attack on Saturday. It's now put that deal on the back burner. What are the chances of Israel finding some sort of opportunity to open the door with Saudi Arabia again, potentially with the path towards a two-state solution? Do you think that that ship has sailed now?
You know, it's sailed for the time being. There's no doubt about it. But will it have sailed? You know, I think that in the long run, the Palestinians are going to have a hard time stopping this kind of normalization going through. And that's because the Saudis are very interested in what Israel has to offer, in good relations with Israel and the technology that Israel has to offer. And they have been building an alliance with Israel over the last decade in order to counter Iran. And those, you know, that interest on the part of Saudi Arabia is not going to go away. Clearly, this operation will make it very difficult for Arab governments to move towards Israel in the short term.
How do you think that America's unconditional support has been interpreted by Israel? Do you think that it's given them a license to do whatever they please, regardless of human rights? And do you think the international community should stand by Israel, regardless of its policies, in the name of revenge?
Well, I think you're absolutely right. This has given, the Biden administration is giving cover to Israel to do what it wants for a period of time. How long that period of time is, big question mark. We saw the same thing happen with Ronald Reagan in Lebanon, when Israel invaded Lebanon, and he gave cover to the Israelis to bomb Beirut for 2 weeks in an attempt to kill the PLO leadership and to destroy the PLO. They were unsuccessful, and Ronald Reagan eventually had to turn against the Israelis and turn against them. He had to ask them to stop the bombing because world pressure had become too large. And I think something similar will happen here in Gaza. The international community is going to turn against the United States. This makes the United States look hypocritical as it claims to be upholding law and order, humanitarian rights, and so forth. Obviously, the United States has a very strong alliance with Israel, and pro-Israeli voices are very important in an election cycle that's about to come up for President Biden. But you're right. In the long run, this damages America. It damages its human rights record, and its reputation as a country that's upholding law and order.
All right, Joshua, really appreciate your time. Joshua Landis, they're Director of the Center for Middle East Studies at the University of Oklahoma.